This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today, I'm going to discuss about cephalopelvic disproportion. Cephalopelvic disproportion in pregnancy is a complication in which there is size mismatch between mother's pelvis and head of the baby. So when there is cephalopelvic disproportion is very important in our country because many of the pregnant patients they come to gynecologists in late labor. Okay, so it is not possible to assess a CPD in India if they come late in labor. So whenever they come to you for antenatal checkups, you have to assess CPD, cephalopelvic disproportion. You have to assess the pelvis. So if there is any cephalopelvic disproportion, then you have to be very careful during delivery because during antenatal period it will not have a problem. During delivery, they'll be having fetal and maternal complications. Cephalopelvic disproportion can stall or completely halt vaginal delivery, making it dangerous or impossible. If an attempting vaginal delivery is unsuccessful, doctor should be quickly move on to cesarean section. So there are three possibilities in cephalopelvic disproportion. So there are three possibilities whenever a patient comes in labor. So when the head of the or the size of the baby is larger than the pelvis, then you have to do a cesarean section. So when the size of the baby is smaller than the pelvis, then you can allow a vaginal delivery. Suppose if there is doubt about whether it is baby is small or large for the pelvis, that is the middle group where you have to assess during active phase of labor. So what are the causes of the cephalopelvic disproportion? So it can be due to large baby due to hereditary factors, diabetes, post-maturity, multiparity, abnormal fetal position, contracted pelvis, and abnormal shaped pelvis. So when the baby is larger, so large baby, usually most common in India, is because of diabetes and post-maturity. Sometimes the patient can have wrong days and the baby can go into post-maturity. Then the baby weight will be more. That can be larger than the size of the pelvis. And then when there is abnormal fetal position, so normal is cephalic presentation. So abnormal fetal positions like breech or a group presentation. So all other presentation other than vertex presentation will have a doubt whether the pelvis is good for a normal vaginal delivery. Next, contracted pelvis is nothing but all the parameters that I'll discuss in later slides. When all the parameters in the pelvis are less than 1.22 centimeters than the original measurements, it is called contracted pelvis. Then abnormally shaped pelvis. Abnormally shaped pelvis is due to some like rickets, osteomalacia, like that. Will be abnormal shaped pelvis. So, so these are four types of pelvises. You know, gynecoid pelvis, android, anthropoid, and platypoid. So gynecoid pelvis is the one which will not have any problem with the vaginal delivery. So other three pelvis will have a problem. So contracted pelvis, you have two definitions, that is anatomical definition and obstetric definition. Anatomical definition is when one or more of its diameter is reduced to below the normal by 1 or more centimeters. Obstetric definition is when if the vaginal delivery is not possible, it's called obstetric definition. So again, factors which influence the shape of the pelvis. So shape is influenced by developmental factors like any congenital disorders, the racial factors, nutritional factors, and any excessive androgen in the body, and metabolic factors like rickets. Because in rickets and osteomalacia, what happens? The bones become soft and they can mold into some other shapes which can cause difficult for a vaginal delivery. And any trauma, disease, or tumors of the bony pelvis legs. So when there is trauma, what will happen? The size of the shape of the pelvis will get distorted. So when there is any fracture of one leg, what will happen? She'll have a limp. And because if the limb is less than 2 centimeters, the pelvis adjusts itself. So the acetabular on one side will tilt down and one side will be tilted upwards, so that to avoid limping. So that will have a problem in the shape of the pelvis. So that will have difficulty in normal vaginal delivery. So developmental disorders in that small gynecoid pelvis and all the small pelvises, that is measurements are less. And just you should know the terms. What is Naegele's pelvis? That is one sacral is absent. So you know that there is a sacral bone, which will have sacral promontory and sacral vertebra. On each side there will be ala. So when one of the ala will be absent, it is called Niggle's pelvis. When both the ala are present, it is called Robert's pelvis. And there is high assimilation pelvis, low assimilation pelvis, and just you should know the names of it. What the other causes are metabolic causes like rickets, osteomalacia, traumatic like in fractures, and when there is any tumors and infections in TB. So when there is a shape of the spine is altered, then also there will be difficulty in delivery for a normal vaginal delivery. So what are those? Lumbar kyphosis, lumbar scoliosis. That is dislocation of one of, that is all these cases in case of any injuries to the bones. So whenever the patient comes to you, we can diagnose cephalopelvic disproportion by from the history. So history, any rickets is expected when there is a history of delayed walking and dentition during the childhood, or Vishas history of trauma, and then when there is a previous obstetric history, when there is a bad obstetric history, like the patient was delivered with baby was delivered by applying a difficult forceps, or the doctor has tried a normal vaginal delivery for some time, and later in the late stage he has taken into cesarean section. So these are all, and the baby is stillbirth. So all these are the risk factors. There is a previous obstetric history. They point out that the patient might have a cephalopelvic disproportion in the first pregnancy. Then you have to examine the patient. First, gait is important. So abdominal gait suggesting that any abnormalities, the pelvis, spines, lobe will produce an abnormal gait. And short stature is one of the important factor. You have to exclude cephalopelvic disproportion. Height, if it is less than 1 centimeters, it is the cutoff point. And then any spines and lobes have a problem or a disease in the past, also you have to examine the patient. And these are the manifestation of rickets. If these are not important to you, then you have to examine the abdomen. So usually in a primary care, when does engagement start? Usually before 3 weeks, or before, we usually 2 to 3 weeks before the EDD. Usually engagement starts in primary gravida. But if the head is non-engaged, then you should have a doubt of CPD, cephalopelvic disproportion. So usually there is pendulous abdomen in case of multigravidas. Why? Because multigravidas there is lax abdomen. So that will have, when there is lax abdomen, the uterus will be falling forward. And usually when the uterus is falling forward, it looks pendulous, because normally the uterine axis should be such that it will go into the pelvis and it will allow for normal delivery. So in case of multi, there will be pendulous abdomen. But in case of primary gravida, if there is pendulous abdomen, that means she might be having a CPD. Then malpresentations, if present, you have to also exclude CPD. Then pelvic parameters, you have internal pelvimetry and external pelvimetry. Internal pelvimetry, you have to do an assessment at about 38 to 39 weeks. So you know the pelvis, you have an inlet and cavity and outlet, right? So inlet, cavity and outlet, all the diameters will be there. And then imaging pelvimetry. So clinical pelvimetry is nothing but what we do. So we assess the inlet, we assess the cavity, we assess the outlet by clinical examination, right? And this is a imaging pelvimetry, that is through an X-ray, CT, MRI. But these are, if you do clinical pelvimetry very nicely and very accurate, or you have by a skilled obstetrician, these will not have any additional point to exclude a CPD. So inlet. So how do you do a clinical pelvimetry? So internal pelvimetry, first you have to assess a forepelvis, that is pelvic brim. So you put an index and the middle finger of your right hand, which is a sterile hand, and just sweep around and see any angulations are there, any depressions are there, and you have to assess the symphysis behind the symphysis pubis. So then afterwards, then you have to assess the conjugate. So clinically we can assess the diagonal conjugate. Indirectly we get the obstetric conjugate and anatomical conjugate. So diagonal conjugate. So how do you measure diagonal conjugate? Ask the patient to empty her bladder and bowels, and put the patient in dorsal position with a sterile glove. Your index and put your index and middle finger into the vagina and try to feel the sacral promontory. Try to feel the, usually in a normal gynecological pregnancy, you will not be able to feel the sacral promontory, but try to feel it, and then you measure, you take a marker pen, and at the base of the index finger, you just where the symphysis, so the tip of the middle finger to the symphysis pubis, you measure the diameter. So usually it is obstetric conjugate, it is about 12.5 centimeters. And if you want to get it is diagonal conjugate is 12.5 centimeters. If you want to get the obstetric conjugate, subtract 1.5 to 2 centimeters, you will get the obstetric conjugate. Okay. If you want to get anatomical conjugate, you have to subtract 1.2 centimeters to 1.5 centimeters. Then cavity. So cavity is that is symphysis pubis. So this obstetric conjugate is of 12.5 centimeters, depending on height, thickness, and inclination of the symphysis pubis, and then shape and inclination of the sacrum. So you have to see whether the sacral promontory is prominent or not, and you have to feel the side walls. So side walls is nothing but you have to assess the side walls whether they are straight or whether they are narrow or whether they're divergent or convergent. Usually, a gynecoid pelvis, the side walls will be divergent. In case of android pelvis and anthropoid pelvis, what happens? So, in case of android pelvis, where the pelvis is heart shaped, what happens? The side wall will be convergent. So, will be convergent. In case of anthropoid pelvis, they're straight. They're not divergent but straight. So, the side walls are important. So, how do you assess the side walls? Is you know that sacrospinous ligament is there, no? So sacrospinous ligament, you have to see. You have to you have to palpate ischial spines, and then you have to with the both hand you palpate ischial index and the middle finger you palpate ischial spines, and then with the thumb you try to reach the ischial tuberosity. Right? When you see if your thumb finger, which is on ischial tuberosity, is lateral, that is it is lateral to your index finger, then it is divergent. So then the pelvis is divergent. Suppose your thumb is medial to your index finger, then the pelvis is convergent. So like that you can assess the side walls. Then cavity. So ischial spines, you know, you can palpate easily if they are blunt. They're difficult to palpate, then it is a good pelvis. If they're prominent, easily felt but not large, or very prominent means they are usually protruding inside. So usually it is more common in android pelvis. Ischial spine is more prominent case of android pelvis. Then you have to see all the sacrospinous ligaments. There is nothing from the ischial spine to the sacrum. So usually the sacrospinous ligament admit 2 fingers on either sides. If it is allowed to admit 2 fingers, then they are fine. Then interischial diameter. So interspinal diameter, with index and the middle finger you measure the interspinal diameter. It is usually 10 centimeters, and if it is less than 8 centimeters, it is called as contracted pelvis. Then sacrosciatic notch. So sacrosciatic notch, the sacrospinous ligament is 2.5 fingers, and the sacrosciatic notch is considered adequate. So sacrosciatic, you know, you have 2 notches like lesser sciatic, greater sciatic notch and lesser sacrosciatic. How these 2 notches are formed? By your sacrospinous and sacrotuberous ligaments. So you can see here, this is how you feel the curve of the sacrum. Then this is the side walls, right? And this is the ischial spines. Okay. Okay. And this is the sacrospinous ligaments. So external pelvimetry we are not going to do because it is not of use for us now. So usually external pelvimetry is because of an X-ray. So but X-ray is contraindicated in pregnancy. That's what is not important, right? Next, ultrasound. Ultrasound is safe and accurate. That you can't measure the measurements of the pelvis, mother side. You can just measure the fetal side. That is biparietal diameter, occiput frontal diameter, and circumference of the head. So usually in exam they'll ask you what are the methods to assess cephalopelvic disproportion. So you have an abdominal method and you have a abdomino-vaginal method. So first abdominal method is the patient is asked to empty her bladder and rectum, and the patient is kept in dorsal position, and then you just put your hand, index and the first I'm telling only abdominal method, right? Index and the middle finger on the inner surface of your index and middle finger on the anterior surface of the symphysis pubis. Okay, and then with the left hand you try to push the head into the pelvis. Okay, suppose if the head goes into the pelvis without interfering with your fingers on the symphysis pubis, it is no disproportion. So if it is a mild or moderate disproportion, then what happens? You can feel the head, when you're pushing the head, you can feel the parietal bones onto your fingers. And then if it is a severe disproportion, the fingers also sometimes get displaced. So that is degrees of disproportion, right? If it is in case of a abdominal pelvic examination. Abdominal pelvic examination, nothing but you put your index and middle finger into the vagina onto the ischial spines and your thumb finger on the symphysis pubis. Okay, same thing. Again, you push the head into the pelvis. Usually, if there is no disproportion, the head pushes into up to the area of ischial spines, right? If it is a moderate, then same thing. The parietal bone will be touching your thumb. If it is severe disproportion, they'll be displacing your. So it is kind of severe disproportion. So why it is important in case? Because if it is a minor disproportion, you can allow a vaginal delivery. If it is a moderate disproportion, you can go for a trial of labor. If it is a severe disproportion, you have to go for a cesarean section. Okay, so these three things. A simple thing, you just imagine a cup and a teacup. So when you drop a tennis ball is very small. So imagine the tennis ball as the size of the head. Okay, and your cup as a pelvis. So if the head is of size of tennis ball, what happens if you throw into the cup? It goes inside. That is, there is no disproportion, and the pelvis is good. And the pelvis is good. If it is case of moderate, if you take a cricket ball size and it just fits into the cup but doesn't go inside, that is case of it is severe disproportions. So you have to go for a cesarean section. So trial of labor, if you want to go for a trial of labor in case of moderate disproportion, it should have a setup for a cesarean section also. You can't do in a PHC or a CHC. There should be a setup. Obstetrician should be there, a skilled obstetrician, and a anesthetic should be available. Blood bank should be there. Then you can give a trial of labor. So trial of labor cannot be determined before the start of the labor. So before you cannot determine. So it has to go to a active phase of labor, then only you will know, because depending upon the efficiency of uterine contraction, depends on molding, depends on the building of the pelvis or soft tissue, whether you can do a normal delivery or cesarean section, it will be known after you start. So trial case in, I told you, in hospital, adequate anesthesia should be there, the patient should be nailed by mouth, and avoid pre-rupture of membranes. Okay, and you have to avoid minimal exam. You have to do a minimal vaginal examination. So in which patients you want to go for a trial of labor? You should be young with no comorbidities. Like you can't give a trial of labor in case of diabetes when the pregnancy is with diabetes or hypertension or a twin pregnancy. All these are contraindicated. Simple case of young primary, which is a moderate disproportion, and the presentation should be vertex, and outlet should be having no contraction. The baby should be of average size. So these are the things you have to be sure before you conduct a trial of labor. Okay, vaginal delivery. If you go, it can either spontaneously or you can apply forceps also. Suppose if there is, you have doubt, suppose molding is more, or the uterine contractions are very adequate, but the head is not descending and there is severe molding, so don't wait. You have to directly go for a cesarean section, or the descent and the dilatation of cervix is delayed. Usually the descent of the cervix, if it is the descent, the station is at 0 after 2 hours also in active phase, and they should have doubt. Or if the cervix is not dilating, if in 2 hours it is usually the cervix dilation is 1 centimeter per hour, but if it is not dilating, even 2 centimeters, after 2 centimeters also there is only 1 centimeter, and I'm not talking about an active phase, then don't wait, go for a cesarean section, because you should not compromise the baby and the mother, because it has its own complications. So fetal complications will be there, maternal complications will be there. So what are the complications? So why you should be very careful while you are doing the trial of labor is because During pregnancy is of not much importance because usually they'll be not having any problems during pregnancy, very less. That is malpresentations, pendulous abdomens, non-engagement. That will not cause any harm to the mother and the baby. But during labor, they have harm. Like during labor, there is slow cervical dilatation. So there can be premature rupture of membranes, obstructed labor, rupture uterus, injury to the joints, and PPH. And what are the fetal complications? Intracranial hemorrhage because severe molding and asphyxia, fracture of the skull when you try to apply forceps, nerve injury, same thing, nerve injuries, intra-immunology infections. Everything is when there is prolonged labor, when you want to apply a forceps or a vacuum, you can injure. Thank you. Half an hour. ఎందుకు ఫోన్ చేసి చెప్పారు ఏమన్నా అక్కడ అంటే నేను ఇంకా ఈ స్లైడ్ మొత్తం చూడలేదు ఈ పెళ్లిమెట్రీ చూడాలి ఒకసారి ఎందుకు